everybody. Sarah with you today for a Technique Tuesday. I'm going to be working with this Catherine Puller Flight of the Dragonfly stamp set. And our theme for February is DIY pattern paper. And my favorite way to make my own pattern paper is to stamp a pattern onto it. So that's what we are going to do today. There are lots of ways within scrapbooking to do pattern papers. You can use mixed media, you can use watercolors, you can use, any kind of medium. But I am a sucker for a fun stamped background. So that's what we're going to play with today. You saw me make a little guide in the middle of my paper. That's so that I don't have to stamp where I don't need to. So I know my finished layout. I'm going to put most of my photos and embellishments into the middle. So I drew myself a little circle, and so I can kind of just stay on the outside of that circle as I do my stamping. I'm going to start with black Catherine Puller Midnight ink. I'm using my Memory Misty so I can stamp more than one of these dragonflies at a time, and that way I can do all 4 of them. So I can stamp 4, then I'm going to clean my stamp set, and then I'll stamp 4 more and then reposition the stamps. So I will be cleaning my stamps between every impression simply because I'm a messy stamper. Like a terrible, awful, no good, very bad messy stamper. And so I think that it's important to know that going in. I know that when I finish this background, there are going to be areas of the background that I don't like. There's going to be an area or 2 where I got an inky fingerprint. And if I try to make it perfect, and if I go into a stamping project trying to make every impression a perfect impression, I'm just going to end up with more inky fingerprints. So I wash my stamps off between every impression. I keep my stamping area clean. I keep my fingers clean and dry. But stamping is never going to be a precise thing for me, and it will probably not be a precise thing for you either. So I always say go into it knowing that your stamped background is not going to be perfect. And then kind of plan for that. For example, I know that this is just the bottom. I'm going to add color on top of these black dragonflies. I'm going to add some little sparkly bits on top of these black dragonflies. These black dragonflies are a base, and I will absolutely be covering over the smidgy bits. Another great thing to do is when you've stamped a background, if you have images you don't like, go ahead, grab yourself a piece of scrap paper and stamp the same image onto the scrap paper. White scrap paper, and then cover it up. I am full of amazing hacks that will help you get a whole stamped background done. And at the end of it, you'll like what you have. And that's the important part. So I'm following those guidelines. I'm keeping, I don't want to stamp where I don't need to stamp, and I'm just stamping in black and moving these stamps all the way across the page. I use a Misty, but any kind of 12 by 12 stamp platform that will keep your white paper in place will work. You could totally 100% freelance this with a piece with an acrylic block and a stamp. If you do that, I would adhere my 12 by 12 paper to a mat with some Sizzix Maker's Tape just to keep everything from sliding around. Just to keep it kind of in the same spot. Otherwise, you might kind of get really, really irritated with yourself after a while. Just saying. A couple of really great stamping tips. First stamping tip, let your stamps rest on your cardstock. Remember that the idea here is that you want the ink that you're putting on that stamp that you're putting into the paper to soak in. You don't want the stamp, you don't want to give it a tap. You don't want to just tap your stamp onto your paper and then immediately, super quickly pull it up. Give that ink some time to adhere to the paper, to get onto the paper, to get the impression that you want. That's tip number one. No, that's wrong. Tip number two, plan for imperfection. Tip number one is plan for imperfection. Tip number two, let your ink rest on your paper. Don't be in a hurry. This is a marathon, not a sprint, when you're doing a full stamped background. Tip number three, do not stress when your stamps get stained. Stamps are going to stain. Stamps that don't stain are not good stamps. There's just no easy way to say that. So don't stress if your stamps stain. And last but not least, and this kind of goes with tip number two, which is to allow your ink to lay on your paper. When you're finished stamping a background, set it aside and let it cure. Let that ink get into your paper. I am using all Catherine Pooler inks today. Catherine Pooler inks do this amazing thing where as they dry, as they soak into the paper, they smooth out. So if your initial impression is a bit blotchy, it's not going to stay blotchy. So it's important before you go crazy putting the stamp ink on the paper. It's really important to kind of let your first impression soak into your paper and let it dry thoroughly before you go with a second impression. Now that I have all of the dragonflies stamped, I'm coming in with their cute little tails and adding a couple of tails to some of the dragonflies all over the page. I'm going to use all but one of the stamps in this particular stamp set for my page today, all but one. And the stamps for this will be linked in the description box below. So you can grab this Flight of the Dragonfly stamp set from the shop if you want. So just working my way around again and doing their little tails. Sorry for my fuzzy head. Next up, I'm going to pull out my original Misty, and we're going to do some more stamping, and then we're also going to do some color on this particular paper. So this is just a scratch paper, but I want to use one of the little sentiments from this stamp set as my title for my page. So I'm just stamping that right in the middle in that same midnight black ink. I'm going to clean it up, and then we're going to work on some colors to add fun and a little pop to our project today. We are going to be using some crazy colors, lots of them. We have Be Mine from Catherine Pooler, Grass Skirt, Glitz, and Sparkling Berry. I chose these colors specifically to match the product that I'm going to be using today, the papers I want to use. So I'm going to now, I don't need to use my door for this because I'm going to be switching colors, and I just want one or two of each of these dragonflies. So I don't feel the need to utilize my door, move my paper around. I can do this with just the matte that is in the bottom of the Misty and all of these colors. Again, letting the stamp rest on the paper for just a bit, just to get a nice clean impression and to allow that ink time to make good contact with the paper. One of the stamps in this stamp set are these cute little circles, and you can kind of mix and match and play with them along with the dragonflies. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take them and I'm going to put some circles around this sentiment that I have stamped. I waited, I did all the dragonflies first, and then I'm coming in and I'm stamping the circles. That way I know that that black ink has soaked in, it's dry. It's not going to try to play and get funny with my sentiment. Once I have all the colorful stamping done, I'm going to go ahead and die cut the dragonflies using the coordinating die set and a circle die from my stash to do the sentiment that I want to use as my title. And then we can go on to the next layer of our original pattern paper. I want to add a little bit more color to my pattern paper, so I'm going to grab 3 acrylic blocks from my stash and the 3 circle stamps that came in the stamp set. I'm going to give each of these circles a color. I'm going to alternate the 3 stamping blocks, and we're going to add some pretty polka dot detail to our background using one color at a time and moving all the way around the paper. I've pulled the foam mat out of my Memory Misty, and that's what I'm using to stamp on so I can get a nice clean impression. Here's a look at our finished pattern paper. It's so pretty. I love it. Now let's go ahead. We're going to put this layout together really quick. So I have all the die cut dragonflies. I pulled some sequins from my stash, and I'm going to be using this Brave and Bold paper pad, which, spoiler alert, comes in the March cherry box. If you are looking for a paper pad with lots of bright, beautiful spring colors, flowers, and those gorgeous grass greens, then I would definitely head over and get a subscription to the cherry box if you don't have one. And if you do, then this paper pad will be coming to you in the March kit. I'm just flipping through it and grabbing some of the papers from that paper pad, and I'm going to put my layout together really quick and easily. I'm going to go ahead and cut this yellow paper into 8x8, put my photos down, and you can already see that you can't even tell that I didn't stamp in the middle of this paper. I'm layering up some patterns and then adding my title and a couple embellishments, and then we are all finished with our tutorial for today. And here's what the finished project looks like. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you've learned some tips and some tricks for creating beautiful stamped backgrounds when you sit down to make your next layout. Have a wonderful, wonderful day, and I will see you all again next month. Bye.